upon a time, two great kingdoms flourished in a land of vast hills and flowing rivers, Udala and Ukpaka kingdom. These lands were rich with fertile soil, and their people lived in harmony with the earth, cultivating crops and building strong communities. For many years, the kingdoms coexisted peacefully. However, a dispute over a piece of fertile land between them shattered their unity. The kingdom of Udala, ruled by the wise and peaceful King Udo, prided itself on its wisdom, diplomacy, and reverence for tradition. Udala was a place of art and learning, where scholars were held in high esteem. On the other hand, the kingdom of Ukpaka, under the rule of the powerful and assertive King Obi, was a land of warriors and traders, known for their strategic insight and ambitious spirit. The disagreement began as a minor argument over who should control fertile land along the Ndu River that separated Udala and Ukpaka. King Udo, believing in negotiation, proposed a peaceful resolution, while King Obi saw the dispute as a challenge to his authority and sought to assert his kingdom's dominance. The river that had once united their people now became a bitter boundary, separating two kingdoms that had once thrived together. Communication ceased and mistrust festered. Both kings grew wary of each other, and their people felt the weight of the tension in every aspect of their lives. Amidst this division, the two royal families had one thing in common: an only child. Uzo, the son of King Udo of Udala, was known for his deep sense of justice and unyielding courage. Though young, Uzo was a thoughtful prince, beloved by his people for his fairness and kindness. Yet, despite his title and royal duties, he longed for something greater: adventure, purpose, and the opportunity to see his kingdom live in peace once again. Across the river, in Ukpaka kingdom, lived Odira, the daughter of King Obi. Odira was celebrated for her beauty and intelligence, but more than that, she was known for her curiosity and wisdom. Odira harbored dreams of charting her own path, far from the political machinations of the Ukpaka kingdom. One fateful day, the kingdom of Udala hosted an event to celebrate victory in a recent battle close to the river that bordered both lands. No one from either town dare go to the river because of fear of their enemy, and the river felt abandoned. But fate had something else in store. It was at this river that Uzo and Odira would meet for the first time, their destinies forever intertwined. Uzo, sitting by the water, noticed a figure on the other side of the river, her form illuminated by the soft light of the moon. As he stood up, curiosity getting the better of him, he called out, "Who are you?" he asked. Odira, startled by the voice, turned towards him, her gaze meeting his across the narrow river. "I should ask you the same," she replied, her tone guarded but intrigued. "I am Uzo, the prince of Udala," he said, stepping closer to the water edge. "And who are you?" "I am Odira, the princess of Ukpaka," she answered, her voice steady. Uzo nodded slowly. "I shouldn't be speaking to you," he said. Odira smiled faintly. "Neither should I," she said. "Why are you here?" Uzo asked. "I should be asking you," Odira responded. For a long moment, they simply stared at one another, both aware of the impossibility of their situation. But something within each of them stirred something that transcended the conflict between their kingdoms. The river, a symbol of the divide between their lands, seemed insignificant compared to the pull they felt towards each other. What began as a forbidding glance quickly grew into a secret bond, one that no war or rivalry could sever. "Please go home. Here is dangerous for you at the moment. If my people see you, they might hurt you. I often come here. Let's talk some other time," Uzo said. Odira bade him goodbye and ran for her life. What a beautiful soul! How could their palace guard be so careless to allow her to come to this river alone? Uzo whispered. Over the weeks that followed, Uzo and Odira continued to meet by the river. Their encounters grew more frequent and more dangerous. They knew the consequences if their parents discovered their meetings, but they couldn't stop. On moonlight nights, they shared their dreams and fears. Uzo spoke of his longing for a life beyond the battles, and Odira shared her hope for peace between their kingdoms. "We are the only heirs to our father's thrones," Uzo said one evening, as they sat beneath the stars. "One day, the future of our people will rest in our hands. I can't bear the thought of continuing this war." Odira looked up with eyes filled with emotion. "Then we must be the ones to end these battles," she said. "Our love and our bond can change the course of history. I know it won't be easy, but we must be brave." As their love deepened, so did the risk they took. The secret meeting couldn't remain hidden forever, and soon, their parents would begin to suspect that something was amiss. One evening, as Uzo made his way to the river, a shadow followed him. It was his closest friend, Dioto, who had noticed Uzo's frequent disappearances. Suspicious of his prince's behavior, Dioto followed Uzo to the river, where he saw what no one in the kingdom of Udala could have imagined: their future king chatting with the enemy princess. Dioto rushed back to the palace, his heart torn between royalty to his prince and royalty to the kingdom. When he reported what he had seen to King Udo, the king's rage knew no bounds. He dares betray his people for the daughter of our enemy, King Udo bellowed. This ends now. At the same time, King Obi had grown suspicious of her constant absences. When his spies reported he had secret meeting with Uzo, he too was furious. "We have lost many lives to their people," King Obi growled. "She will not disgrace our kingdom by consulting with the son of our enemy." Uzo was summoned by the king immediately after he entered the palace. "Where were you coming from?" the king bellowed. Uzo, surprised at the question, was dumbfounded. "Should I repeat myself?" the king shouted. Uzo pulled back. "I went on strolling," he said, stammering. "How dare you? Of all the girls in this village and other neighboring villages, you couldn't see any to date, but the daughter of my arch-enemy. Don't dare me, Uzo, or I will chop off your head myself," the king warned him. Uzo left his father's presence devastated. His bond with Odira had grown so deep that he couldn't stay a day without seeing her. The king ordered the guards to keep eye on him. Both kingdoms prepared to put an end to the forbidden bond. King Udo mounted spies to monitor his son wherever he goes. The next evening, Uzo and Odira met as usual by the river, but this time, something was different. Uzo's expression was tense, his shoulder heavy with the weight of his father's anger. "My parents were aware, Odira," he whispered. "My parents knew about us." Odira's heart sank. She had feared this day would come, but hearing it loud filled her with dread. "What will they do?" she asked. "They will stop us. They will do everything in their power to keep us apart," Uzo said, his voice cracking. "But I won't let them, Odira. We have to fight for this, for us." Odira stepped closer to the edge of the water, her hands trembling as she stretched forth her hands to touch the flowing river. "I will fight, Uzo. I will stand by you. But how can we change the hearts of men who have known only hatred?" Uzo, stooping down and stretching his hands to touch the river, said, his voice soft and determined, "We are their only children, Odira. Without us, their legacies will crumble. They have to listen. But for now, we have to stop coming here." Uzo and Odira agreed to change their meeting venue to Alo, their neighboring village, to avoid anything bad happening to any of them. They will meet under the ancient Iloko tree beside the village oracle. They made a bold decision. Any day their parents will come for them, they will not run. Instead, they would confront their parents and demand peace, or else they will leave both kingdoms behind forever. Unknowing to them, spies from both kingdoms were hearing their discussions. Before Uzo and Odira could plead for their love, both King Udo and King Obi gave them a brutal choice: to either renounce their love and remain in their respective kingdoms, or hold onto their love and be banished from the lands forever. King Udo's voice filled with wrath. "Uzo, you must choose between the kingdom you were born to rule, or your treasonous love for the daughter of our enemy." King Obi echoed the sentiment. "Odira, you have disgraced Ukpaka kingdom. If you choose this prince, you will no longer be my daughter. You will be nothing but an outcast." Uzo and Odira exchanged a long, solemn look. It was a heart-wrenching decision, but none hesitated. With their hands clasped, they chose each other over the kingdom that raised them. "We choose our love," Uzo declared, his voice steady. "We choose our happiness," Odira added. "Then you are no longer the prince of Udala," King Udo spat in fury. "Leave and never return." Without a word, Uzo and Odira walked out, banished from the only homes they had ever known. They set out to forge a life together, not knowing their departure would soon plunge both kingdoms into chaos. Not long after Uzo and Odira were cast out, the consequences of their exile began to unravel in both the Udala and the Ukpaka kingdoms. In Ukpaka, all the plants began to wither and die. The once lush and fertile lands dried up, and a great drought seized the kingdom. Soon, a devastating famine spread across the river, and the river, which had always flowed strongly between the two kingdoms, began to dry up. King Obi, once proud and unyielding, was helpless as his people starved. Across the river in Udara, tragedy struck in a different form. A mistrust illness swept through the kingdom, striking down the strongest men one by one. Able-bodied warrior fell ill, and soon the kingdom were overwhelmed with griefs as more and more widows wept for their lost husbands. Even the king himself, King Udo, was not spared. His body grew weaker and weaker. He fell gravely ill. The kingdom's healer and priest tried every remedy they could think of, but nothing worked. As King Udo lay on his deathbed, the chief priest of Udala traveled to distant Nimo to consult a higher oracle. Upon his return, the priest's face was pale and his voice shook as he delivered the oracle decrees. Only sand from the Ukpaka's king's palace spread across the land of Udala will heal the king and stop the plague. Without it, our king will die. Meanwhile, in Ukpaka, the chief priest has also consulted their oracle. The verdict was equally shocking. Only if the king of Udala comes to Ukpaka, lays his hands on our land, and perform a sacred ritual within the palace, will the drought end and the river flow. Other kingdoms were struck by despair. They were sworn enemies. How could they ever fulfill these impossible demands of the oracle? The people of Udala and Ukpaka were desperate. The kings, once full of pride, were now at the mercy of forces beyond their control. But neither kingdom knew the other's plight, for communication between them had been severed long ago. In the royal palaces, the queen mothers of both kingdoms wept endlessly. They mourned not only the tragedies that has befallen their lands, but also the loss of their children, Uzo and Odira, whose love had cost them everything. Queen of Udala could barely look at her dying husband. "We have lost Uzo. Now we are losing you," she sobbed. "What have we done to deserve this?" On the other side of the river, Queen of Ukpaka was inconsolable. "My daughter is gone and our kingdom is crumbling. How could love cause so much destruction?" But even as they grieved, neither of the queens knew the impossible task that had laid upon them. The kings refused to speak of it, stubborn in their pride, unwilling to reach out to the other. Days passed, and the suffering in both kingdoms deepened. The people whispered curses and sought answers, but none came. Meanwhile, Uzo and Odira, living as outcasts, had no idea of the chaos their absence has caused. The tension in both palaces grew unbearable. In Ukpaka, the people demanded answers from their king, while in Udala, the nobles whispered of rebellion if the king's health did not improve. But neither King Udo nor King Obi would swallow their pride and reach out to the other. The oracle decrees seemed impossible to fulfill. How could King Udo perform a sacred ritual in the heart of his enemy's land? How could the people of Udala gather sand from the Ukpaka's palace without igniting a war? As everything continued to fall apart, it became clear that Uzo and Odira, the ones who had been banished, were the only ones who could save their kingdoms. Uzo and Odira had built a humble life together, far from the river that once divided their kingdoms. Though they had been banished, their love for each other grew stronger each day. They lived quietly, unaware of the devastation their departure had caused. One evening, as the sun dipping below the horizon, a traveler from Udala stumbled upon Uzo. Recognizing him as the banished prince, he knelt before him begging for help. "My prince," the man said, "the kingdom of Udala is in ruin. The king is dying, and the sickness that has taken the lives of many warriors now spread like wildfire. We have sought cures and performed rituals, but nothing worked. Our only hope lies in a strange decree from the oracle that sand from Ukpaka's palace must be brought to Udala kingdom and spread across the land to save the king and his people." Uzo's heart sank as he listened. The guilt he had tried to bury for so long surged to the surface. His love for Odira had caused this, and now his people were paying the price. He clenched his fist. "We were banished," he said quietly, glancing at Odira, who stood beside him, her eyes wide with fear. "But if this is true, then we need no choice. We must act." But it wasn't only Udala that had suffered. The same night, Odira had a dream that sent chills down to her bones. "Uzo," Odira called out in her sleep, "the kingdom of Ukpaka is withering. The crops have died, the rivers have dried up, and a famine has taken hold of the land. I saw a man saying that the only remedy is that King Udo must come to our palace and perform a sacred ritual, or Ukpaka kingdom will be lost." Odira gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "My father will never allow King Udo to set foot in Ukpaka," she whispered. "This is impossible." Uzo turned to her, his face resolute. "It may seem impossible, but we must try. The people are suffering because of us, Odira. If we do nothing, both kingdoms will fall." With a heavy heart, Uzo and Odira set out on their journey back to the lands they had once called home. They knew they would not be welcomed, but the fate of their people deepened on them. They traveled through the night, avoiding patrols and crossing the river under the cover of darkness. Their first stop was the kingdom of Udala. Uzo approached the gate of the city, now guarded by soldiers who had once fought alongside him. He knew they would not let him in easily. State your mission here, one of the guards demanded, raising despair as Uzo and Odira came into view. Uzo stood tall. I am Uzo, son of King Udo, and this is Odira, daughter of King Obi. We have come to save our people. The guards exchanged shocked glances, but did not lower their weapons. You were banished. You have no place here, one of them said, though his voice wavered. Odira stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. The kingdom is dying. We knew the oracle decrees. You need sand from my father's palace to save your king. Let us through, and we will bring an end to this suffering. Reluctantly, the guards stepped aside, allowing Uzo and Odira to enter the city. The once bustling street of Udala were now really quiet, and the air were thick with sorrow. Uzo's heart ached as he walked through the kingdom he had once hoped to rule. His people were dying, and it was all because of him. When they reached the palace, they found King Udo bedridden, his face pale and gaunt. The queen sat by his side, her eyes red with weeping. She gasped when she saw her son and Odira standing in the doorway. Uzo, she whispered, rushing to embrace him. You have returned. Uzo held his mother close, then turned to his father. I have come to save you, father, but I need something in return. You must go to Ukpaka, and you must lay your hands on their land. Only then will their kingdom be healed, and only then will they give us the sand we need. King Udo, weakened by illness, struggled to speak. Ukpaka, he raps, they are our enemies. I cannot. Uzo knelt beside his father's bed, his eyes filled with concern. Father, you must. If you don't, we will all die. There is no other way. Leaving Udala, Uzo and Odira made their way to Ukpaka, knowing that the task ahead was just as difficult, if not more so. King Obi will never allow an outsider, let alone the king of Udala, to set foot in his palace. But Odira knew she had to try. As they approached the gates of Ukpaka, Odira stepped forward. The guards, recognizing her as the banished princess, hesitated, but let her pass. The moment Odira entered the palace, her father rose from the throne, his face a mask of fury. You dare return here, he thundered. You, who betrayed your kingdom for that prince? Odira stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. Father, listen to me. Ukpaka is dying. The drought is killing our people, and the river has dried up. You knew the oracle decree. Only King Udo can save us from performing the ritual in this palace. We have no choice. King Obi's face twisted with rage. I will not allow that bloody man to set his foot in my kingdom, even if it cost us everything. Odira's voice shook with emotion. Then you will lose me again, and this time I will never return. And besides, every living thing is hungry and dying. Soon there won't be any Ukpaka kingdom. The few survivors might end up becoming slaves for the Udala kingdom. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment silence fell over the king's court. King Obi's anger wavered, and he looked at his daughter with a mixture of pain and love. Very well, he said at last, his voice thick with emotion. If this is the only way, I will allow it. In a moment that we go down the history, King Udo carried on a litter was brought to the palace of Ukpaka. The people of both kingdoms watched in surprise as the two kings, once mortal enemies, stood together in the heart of Ukpaka's sacred palace. King Udo, though weak, laid his hands on the ground and recited the words of the sacred ritual. The air grew thick with tension as the crowd waited in silence. Then a gust of wind swept through the palace, and the earth seemed to tremble beneath them. In the distance, great thunder with lightning roared, and the river roared to life once more, its water flowing strong and clear. The drought has ended. There was peace and refreshment in the atmosphere. In exchange, the people of Ukpaka gathered bags of sacred sands from the palace and handed them to Uzo and Odira, who returned to Udala. There, they spread the sand across the land, and the sickness that had plagued the kingdom began to fade. The king's health slowly returned, and the widows of Udala were granted peace as their loved ones were healed. The impossible task had been fulfilled, and the once warring kingdoms were saved. The people of Udala and Ukpaka, having witnessed the power of love and sacrifice, began to see that the division between them had caused nothing but pain and death. With both kingdoms saved, the kings, humbled by the events that had transpired, agreed to a union that would forever change their lives. Uzo and Odira, whose love had once been forbidden, were allowed to marry in a grand ceremony that united Udala and Ukpaka under under one rule. The new kingdom was named Igboeze in honor of the unity that had been forged through love and sacrifice. Uzo and Odira were crowned the king and queen, ruling together with wisdom and compassion. Under their reign, Igboeze flourished, the river flowing freely. The story of Uzo and Odira's love, once forbidden and punished, became a legend that was told for generations to come. A reminder that love, above all else, has the power to heal and unite.